Hey guys, tonight you find yourself inside a walled medieval town before dawn, lying on damp straw in the corner of a drafty guest room where cold stone presses through the floor. Smoke hangs in the rafters, and your boots sit by the door with yesterday's mud drying on them like a second, less fashionable leather. Somewhere beyond the shutter, river mist creeps between timber houses. Horse breath clouds the winter air, and a distant bell begins to mutter from the monastery tower. Torchlight gutters in the yard below, thin and orange, while a dog complains at absolutely nothing, which is apparently his official civic duty. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You pull your wool blanket closer and remember, with gentle honesty, that you probably would not last a week out here without someone telling you when to eat, when to work, and when not to wander into a ditch. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what your local time is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The bell sounds again, deeper this time, rolling over the steep roofs and down into the lanes as if the whole town is being gently turned in its sleep. You do not see a clock. No round face waits above the door. No neat hands point to a number. No little machine rescues you from the ancient human art of guessing. Instead, there is only the bell, the cold, and the soft stirring of people who have learned to live by signs. You lie still for a moment, listening. The straw beneath you smells faintly of damp hay, old boots, and smoke. Rushes are scattered over the stone floor, not fresh enough to be pleasant, not old enough to be entirely horrifying. Someone has tried to sweeten them with dried lavender and rosemary, though the herbs are losing a quiet war against wet wool. Near the hearth, a half-burned beeswax candle has slumped into a little golden hill, its wick black and curled like a sleeping insect. It was not burned for decoration. It was burned because last night, when darkness filled the room, flame itself became a kind of time. A man across from you groans beneath his cloak. He is a carter, judging by the cracked hands, the smell of horse, and the way he mutters about a broken wheel as if it has personally betrayed him. Beside the door, a pilgrim with a scallop badge sewn to his hat sits up slowly and crosses himself. No one asks what hour it is. The bell has answered well enough. Out beyond the shutter, the monastery calls the first office of the day. Some swear the bells can be heard farther in frost than in summer, because winter air is sharper and carries holy bronze more cleanly. No one can quite agree whether this is true, or whether cold people simply listen harder because they have nothing better to do than suffer attentively. Either way, the sound passes through the town wall, over the ditch, past the sleeping pigs and shuttered shops, and into your bones. You rise because everyone else rises. That is one of the first lessons of a world without clocks. Time is not private. It belongs to bells, masters, mothers, monks, cattle, hunger, daylight, and the habits of those around you. A person who sleeps too long does not merely miss an alarm. He misses bread from the oven, a place in the market queue, a chance to pass through the gate before the road turns crowded. Or perhaps the patience of a landlord who believes idleness is a moral disease best treated with shouting. You pull on your boots. They are stiff with dried mud, and as you work your feet into them, you hear movement below a latch lifted, an oak door groaning open, a bucket knocked against a step. The guest housekeeper is awake, though not cheerful. Cheerfulness before sunrise is regarded with suspicion in most sensible ages. She moves through the room with a rushlight in one hand, its little flame fed by pith dipped in tallow, and she tells the sleepers to stir themselves. For the first bell has gone, and the gate will not wait for dreamers. Down the narrow stair you go, ducking beneath a beam darkened by generations of smoke. The air below is warmer but thicker, full of last night's ashes, boiled onions, and the sour comfort of small ale. On a trestle table sit coarse bread, a wooden bowl of cold pottage, and a knife tied by a cord so travellers do not accidentally carry away the household's entire cutlery collection. Medieval hospitality is generous, but it keeps one eye open. You eat because dawn work begins better with something in the stomach, even if that something looks as though it has already had a difficult life. The bread is dense, grey-brown, and gritty at the edges where the millstone has left its tiny reminders. The pottage is made from peas, leeks, and whatever else could be persuaded into the pot. You warm your hands around the bowl and listen as the bell fades. In its absence, other sounds appear, shutters opening, hens shifting in coops, a smith coughing awake, the distant slap of water where someone draws from the town well. No one here speaks of minutes. A woman says she must reach the bakehouse before the oven cools. The carter says he must load before the second bell, or the road will be mud-churned by every cart leaving town. The pilgrim says he hopes to hear prime at the abbey before taking the north road. Their day has shape, but not from numbers. It is shaped by church offices, by tasks, by light, by the order in which things must happen or be lost. When you step outside, the lane is blue with early cold, the houses lean over you, upper stories jutting as if they're whispering secrets across the narrow street. Smoke leaks from roof holes and crooked chimneys. The stones underfoot are slick, and the gutter in the middle of the lane carries a slow, unpleasant ribbon of yesterday. You follow the keeper into the yard, where a stable boy shakes straw from a cloak and squints toward the paling sky. Another bell answers from farther off, softer and thinner. Perhaps it belongs to a parish church beyond the market, perhaps to a chapel tucked near the river gate. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about how many bells a town can truly hear before dawn. Some insist they know each one by tone, as a shepherd knows sheep, while others nod wisely and pretend the cracked one near St. Mildred's does not sound exactly like a cooking pot being punished. Still, the bells matter. They are the bones of the morning, in a world where few people own costly timepieces, and many cannot read even if a dial were placed before them. Bells make an invisible agreement. They tell monks when to pray, bakers when to rake embers, servants when to sweep rushes from halls, guards when to change watch, and travellers when to stop pretending they can sleep a little longer. You stand beneath the town wall and look up at the fading stars. The gate tower is a black shape against the slow grey sky. A guard in a fur-lined cloak stamps his feet and rubs his hands, his iron keys hanging from his belt in a heavy ring. He's been awake through the last part of night, measuring his duty not by a clock but by bells, footsteps, cold, and the hope that his replacement is not the sort of man who mistakes lateness for personality. The monastery bell sounds again, not hurried, not anxious, simply certain. Its voice passes over the roofs, and the town answers by becoming itself doors opening, carts creaking, fires coaxed alive, prayers murmured, bread broken, animals stirred, water carried, bargains prepared, and tired bodies accepting that the day has begun. You feel it then, quietly, how medieval time is not empty space divided into numbers. It is a pattern of obligations and sounds, of sacred rhythm and practical need. You follow the lane toward the gate, breath clouding before you, behind you. The guest room sinks back into shadow, the damp straw abandoned, the candle hardened beside the hearth. Ahead, the bell's last trembling note lingers over the town like a hand resting on a shoulder, guiding you onward into the pale beginning of a day that has no clock, and yet somehow knows exactly how to start. You pass beneath the gate just as the first grey of morning gathers along the road, and the guard lifts his iron keys with the solemnity of a man who believes every lock in town depends upon his personal suffering. The hinges complain, the oak leaves of the gate open slowly, and cold air slips in from the fields with the smell of frost, dung, damp earth, and distant wood smoke. Behind you, the town bell has gone quiet, but its shape remains inside the morning, like the memory of a handbell after it stops ringing. Ahead, beyond the ditch and the low thorn hedge, the village yards are beginning to stir. A rooster gives a ragged cry from somewhere near the bakehouse, then another answers from a roof beam, then a third seems to make a noise not quite like crowing, and not quite like being personally offended by dawn. No one can quite agree whether roosters truly know the hour, or whether they simply enjoy announcing themselves whenever the world appears insufficiently impressed. Still, people listen, a cock crow before light, another as the sky pales, another when the yard becomes visible. These are not numbers, but they are signs, and signs are enough. You follow the carter with a broken wheel into a farmyard just outside the wall, where he hopes to borrow an iron pin from a cousin who owes him either a favour or an apology. The yard lies stiff with frost. Straw crunches beneath your boots. A pig noses at a trough, offended to find it empty. Geese stand like small white judges beside a puddle skimmed with ice. 2 oxen breathe clouds into the air while a boy works at their yoke with numb fingers, muttering softly because anger is warmer than silence. The farmer's wife comes out first, wrapped in a wool cloak patched at the hem. She carries a wooden bucket and moves by memory more than sight. She knows where the step dips, where the hens sleep, where the gate latch sticks, where the dung heap begins, which is knowledge you very much want before walking confidently through medieval darkness. Her day begins not because a clock insists upon it, but because the animals have stomachs, the oven has embers, the water must be drawn. And hunger is perhaps the oldest timekeeper of all. The rooster crows again, proudly useless. A child near the byre says it means the sun is nearly up. An old man seated on a chopping block says it means rain within 3 days, because his grandmother told him a cock that crows toward the north is never merely crowing. Some swear that animals sense changes in weather, illness, and even death before humans do. Others quietly suspect animals mostly sense food, danger, and open doors, even now. It is hard to tell whether the old man believes the rooster or simply enjoys having a theory before breakfast. You stand near the stable and rub your hands together. Your fingers ache with cold. The yard moves in layers, the soft clatter of a milk pail, the scrape of a rake through dirty straw, the knock of wood against wood as the carter turns over a spare wheel rim. Smoke begins to rise from the cottage roof, darker at first, then thinner as the hearth catches. That smoke is another kind of clock. When smoke rises from 3 or 4 houses, the village is waking. When it hangs thick and low, the air is damp. When it smells of baking rye, people start appearing in doorways with the sudden devotion of saints at a relic shrine. Inside the cottage, You duck beneath the lintel and feel warmth gather around your shins before it reaches the rest of you. The room is low, dim, and soot-black above the hearth. Rushes lie across the packed floor, mixed with dried herbs that crackle underfoot. A small iron pot hangs from a hook, and yesterday's pottage is being loosened with water, because nothing says good morning quite like persuading old peas to become new breakfast. A loaf wrapped in cloth rests near the wall, guarded from mice by being placed on a shelf too high for mice and just low enough for optimistic children. Here, too, time is made of habit. The farmer's wife does not ask whether it is 6 or 7. She says the cows are restless, so milking is late. The boy says the frost is still hard, so the field can wait a little. The old man says his knees have begun to ache, which apparently means the sun is thinking about climbing over the eastern ridge. Medieval science often comes from joints, birds, smoke, and confident relatives, and while it may not satisfy a university master, it does have the advantage of being immediately available. You take a wooden cup of small ale, weak enough for morning and safer than much water drawn from a questionable ditch. It is sour, thin, and oddly comforting. Beside it, you're given coarse bread and a smear of soft cheese wrapped in linen. A charm hangs above the door, rowan twigs bound with red thread, meant to keep mischief away from the threshold. No one mentions it until you look at it too long, and then the old man says it is only an old habit, which is what people often say about things they would rather not remove. Outside, the world brightens by degrees. Not sunrise yet, not fully, but enough that faces become faces instead of woolen shadows. The dog from the guest house has followed you, or perhaps all medieval dogs are secretly the same dog moving from yard to yard in search of scraps. He sits by the door with the grave patience of a monk at prayer, except that his holy object is the heel of your bread. You give him a crumb, he accepts it as tribute. The carter finds his iron pin at last, after a discussion about whether it was borrowed, lent, stolen, misplaced, or taken by a boy who denies everything with impressive calm. While the men crouch by the wheel, you watch the villagers measure morning without speaking of measurement. A woman shakes out a cloak because the smoke has thinned. A girl drives hens from the garden because they have begun scratching in earnest. The boy with the oxen looks toward the ridge because the pale line there has warmed from ash grey to dull silver. Every person in the yard reads a different sign, and together those signs become the hour. Another rooster cries, closer now, and is immediately answered by geese, because geese believe all public announcements require their supervision. The farmer's wife steps from the cottage and says the road should be taken before the thaw makes it heavy. That is as clear as any clock striking. Frost holds the mud firm for a little while, but once the sun reaches it, carts sink, boots drag, and every mile becomes longer than a sermon delivered by a priest who has discovered a new sin. You help lift the cart shaft while the wheel is settled. The iron rim bites into frozen ruts. Your breath rises. The wool at your shoulders smells of smoke and wet lanolin. Somewhere beyond the village, the monastery bell sounds again, faint but steady, reminding the fields that holy order has not forgotten them. Yet here in the yard, the bell is only one voice among many rooster, cow, bucket, hinge, stomach, smoke, and the soft command of routine. You step back onto the road as the first true rim of sun presses against the far hills. The villagers do not celebrate it. They simply move faster. Morning has arrived not all at once, but by feathers, breath, frost, fire, and hunger. You understand a little better now that time without clocks is not emptiness or confusion. It is 1,000 small agreements between body and world. The rooster may be unreliable, the old man's knees may be dramatic, and the dog may be using sacred silence for bread, but still the day gathers itself and carries everyone forward. The road leaves the farmyard in a pale ribbon of frozen ruts, and you walk with the carter while the repaired wheel turns with the soft wooden groan, as if it has forgiven the world but not forgotten the insult. The dog trots behind you for several dozen steps, then ahead of you, then behind again, apparently appointed by no authority except hunger. Frost clings to the hedges. The first sunlight spills slowly over the fields. Not bright yet. Only a thin wash of silver and wheat gold touching the brown stubble, the ditch water, the bent grass, and the backs of crows searching the furrows. No one says the hour. Instead, the carter glances at the light where it falls across the road and clicks his tongue. "We have time before the thaw," he says, which is not very exact, but it carries the weight of experience. You look down and see what he means. The mud is still hard beneath your boots. The cartwheels bite but do not sink. In this world, a road can tell time through the soles of your feet. Frozen ground means hurry while you can. Soft ground means regret has begun. You pass low cottages with smoke rising from their roofs, and shutters pushed open to catch the morning. A woman stands in her doorway, one hand on the frame, studying the patch of sun creeping across her threshold. She does not need a dial. She knows that when the light reaches the worn stone just inside the door, it is time to send the older children after water. When it touches the stool by the wall, the hens should be out. When it crosses the rushes near the hearth, the bread dough must be checked before the bakehouse grows crowded. Her house is a clock, though it has no face, only shadows and memory. Inside one cottage, the door hangs open, and you glimpse a girl sweeping yesterday's rushes toward the threshold with a bundle of twigs. The rushes carry crumbs, ash, muddy bits of straw, and whatever the family would rather not discuss too closely. Fresh reeds wait in a tied bundle near the wall, sprinkled with dried tansy and meadowsweet. Some swear that tansy keeps flies and ill luck away together, though no one can quite agree whether the flies or the ill luck are more offended by it. The girl pauses, lifts her face toward the light, and calls to someone unseen that the sun has reached the lower peg. The lower peg means something here, so does the upper beam, the corner of the oven stone, the edge of the well cover, the shadow of the pear tree, the damp mark on the wall where morning never quite dries. Medieval people may not carry clocks, but they carry maps of light in their minds. They know how the sun enters a room in Lent, how it slips higher by midsummer, how it arrives late and weak in deep winter, how clouds can cheat a whole household into moving too slowly. Time lives in doorways. You stop at a well where two women are drawing water with a rope that complains over the wooden roller. The bucket rises dark and dripping. One woman shades her eyes, looks at the side of the church tower beyond the roofs, and says the sun has not yet touched St. Cuthbert's niche. That, she explains, means the miller has no excuse for being late. The other woman says the miller has never needed an excuse. He was born late, and will likely arrive late to Judgment Day. It is said so gently that it feels less like an insult and more like a village calendar. The carter laughs under his breath and checks the repaired wheel again. You notice how often people glance upward, sideways, eastward. They read walls, roofs, frost, steam, smoke, and the length of their own shadows. A boy sets a basket beneath the dripping eave because he knows the sun will soon loosen the frost from the thatch. An old woman moves a stool toward the door so her knees may warm in the first light. A leather worker lifts hides onto a rail, judging by the brightness whether they will dry before evening damp returns. Each task waits for its proper portion of the day, and the day reveals itself by inches. You continue through a lane between garden plots where winter cabbages sag under beads of ice. A man with a mattock stands beside a small field, not yet working. He holds his hands inside his sleeves and watches the shadow of an ash tree lie long across the ground. He says the soil must soften just a little, but not too much. Strike too soon, and the earth resists like old iron. Wait too long, and it clings to the blade in heavy lumps. This is farming by light and touch, by patience and suspicion, which may be the oldest form of expertise. Near a cottage wall, you see a child marking yesterday's charcoal line beneath a window. The line shows where the shadow ended when the mother called everyone in for the evening meal. Today, they will compare it, because longer light means spring is not only a promise from priests and seed sellers. Some swear that if a child measures shadows too closely, he will grow into a clerk, which is treated as either a blessing or a family tragedy depending on whether the household needs wages or help lifting sacks. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the warning is superstition, joke, or practical fear of ink-stained fingers. The dog noses at the charcoal line, finds it uninteresting, and returns to your heel. By now the sun rests more firmly on the road. Roof frost begins to loosen and fall in quiet patters. The lane smells of thawing straw, hearth smoke, damp wool, and the faint sweetness of malt from a brewer's shed. You pass an open doorway where a woman sets a small pot of ale mash near the warmth, muttering that the yeast wakes when it pleases, like a lord, a cat, or a monk after a heavy supper. She covers the vessel with linen and turns it slightly toward the light. Fermentation, too, has its own slow clock. At the edge of the village, the church wall catches full morning. The stone turns from blue-grey to honey-grey, and a carved saint above the side door seems to emerge from sleep. His face is chipped, his hands too large, his expression patient in the way of saints who have watched generations be late for everything. A woman crossing herself below him whispers a charm before stepping into the road, asking for safe passage until the bell calls again. You cannot tell whether she prays from faith, habit, caution, or all three braided together like a wool cord. The carter points with his chin toward the open fields. When our shadows shorten, we stop, he says. When they stretch again, we find shelter. It sounds simple, but as you walk on, you begin to feel how much wisdom hides inside it. The body learns the sun, the eyes learn walls, feet learn frost, hunger learns distance. A person survives by noticing what the world is already saying. Behind you, the village continues its quiet work, each cottage answering the crawling light in its own way. Ahead, the road bends toward darker trees, and beyond them, the faint tower of an abbey where bells will soon divide the day with more solemn certainty. For now, you walk through the soft, widening morning, watching your shadow travel beside you, long and thin on the road, a humble companion keeping time without a single tick. The abbey grows slowly out of the morning haze, first as a dark tooth of tower above the bare trees, then as a cluster of roofs, walls, chimneys, and pale stone warmed by the low sun. You hear it before you properly reach it, not only the bell, though the bell is there, steady and round, but the softer machinery of a holy household waking into order. There is the scrape of a broom across a cloister walk, the low murmur of voices chanting somewhere behind thick walls, the knock of a bucket against the well curb, the creak of a cart bringing winter roots to the kitchen yard. Even the crows seem to hop more respectfully here, though perhaps they're only waiting for crumbs with better manners than usual. You and the carter turn beneath an arch where the stone is worn smooth by generations of palms. A lay brother in a brown wool habit meets you at the guest gate, his face red from cold and his sleeves dusted with flour. He does not ask what hour you think it is. He knows. The bell has said enough. Primer's past or is passing, depending on whom you ask. Because no one can quite agree whether the true moment belongs to the first sound of the bell, the last echo, or the opening words of prayer. In an abbey, such matters can become very serious in a very quiet way. You step into the guest court, grateful for the shelter of walls. The wind softens. The mud changes from wild road mud to disciplined monastery mud, which is still mud, but seems faintly ashamed of itself. Along one side stands the guest house, its oak door banded with iron. Along another, the bakehouse exhales warm, yeasty air so comforting that even the dog, who has followed you all this way like an unpaid pilgrim, sits down and looks spiritually moved. A monk passes carrying 2 loaves on a board, and the dog watches him with the devotion of a relic seeker. Inside the guest hall, rushes cover the floor in a cleaner layer than the town lodging offered, mixed with sweet flag and rosemary. The hearth is broad, the rafters soot dark, the benches plain. On the wall hangs a small painted panel of St. Benedict, stern but not unkind, holding a book as though he's just found someone reading the wrong page. A beeswax candle burns near the panel, its flame still in the dimness. It smells faintly of honey, a soft golden scent beneath the smoke. Here, candles are not merely for seeing, they are measured, watched, trimmed, and sometimes marked, because flame can tell a household how far the night has gone, or how long a prayer has lasted. The lay brother gives you bread, watered ale, and a bowl of thick pottage made with barley, leeks, and bits of smoked fish. You eat slowly, letting warmth return to your hands. The carter speaks with another brother about the road north, the bad ditch near the alder grove, and whether the bridge after St. Winner's shrine still holds. The brother says it held yesterday, which in medieval travel counts as encouraging news but not a promise. Then another bell sounds from within the abbey, sharper and nearer, and every monk in the yard seems to know what his body must do before thought catches up. A young novice hurries past with ink on his fingers and a look of mild panic, carrying a bundle of wax tablets. He tries not to run, because running in a cloister suggests either emergency or poor discipline, and novices are often accused of both. Some swear that a monk who is late to choir must kiss the floor before taking his place. Others insist this happens only in stricter houses, or only when the prior is in a mood sharp enough to cut cheese. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but the novice moves as though the floor is a real possibility. You follow the sound through a side passage and pause near the cloister, not entering the inner places where guests should not wander. The cloister walk forms a square around a winter garden, bare and quiet, with a covered well at its centre. Monks move along the covered walk in pairs or alone, habits brushing the stone, heads bowed. Their day is divided not into hours as you might number them, but into offices matins in the dark, lauds near dawn, prime when day begins, then terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. Prayer makes a ladder across the day, and everyone here climbs it whether hungry, sleepy, cold, or secretly hoping the kitchen has saved the better crusts. The bell is their great keeper. It gathers them from the scriptorium, the infirmary, the stable, the garden, the brewhouse, the kitchen. It tells hands to set down quills, knives, spades, ladles, and leech jars. It tells mouths to stop bargaining over turnips and start chanting psalms. It tells the body that sacred time outranks ordinary irritation. You watch a monk leave a half-split log beside the woodpile at the first note. Another abandons a broom leaning neatly against the wall. A third, older and slower, keeps moving at his own careful pace, as if he and the bell have known each other too long to pretend surprise. Near the scriptorium door, warmth and lamplight spill through a crack. You glimpse desks set close to the windows where the best daylight falls, parchment sheets weighted by smooth stones, knives for scraping vellum, horn ink wells, and quills cut to sharp points. The scribes must work while light permits. Their eyes depend upon the sun, their pace upon bells, their progress upon the stubborn drying of the ink. One monk has placed a small sand glass near his elbow, the kind used for short tasks, though it is not trusted for ruling the whole day. Sand runs whether a man is virtuous or foolish, which makes it useful, but also rather rude. A brother notices your gaze and says the sand glass is for copying a set number of lines before the ink is checked. He smiles, then adds that some claim sand from certain shores flows more evenly than common sand, especially if washed in wine and dried in Lent. No one can quite agree whether this improves timekeeping or merely ruins wine. The monk says this so gently that you cannot tell whether he believes it, mocks it, or has copied the same claim in 3 different manuscripts and no longer cares. Beyond the cloister, in the kitchen court, order takes a more fragrant form. The cook times his work by offices as much as by fire. Peas soak after one bell, bread is drawn after another, fish is smoked when the draught runs steady, and the great pot is moved closer or farther from the flame by eye, smell, and long practice. A servant boy turns a spit with a face of deep moral injury, though there is only a small joint upon it, not enough to justify heroic suffering. He watches a patch of sunlight on the wall, waiting for it to touch the hanging ladle, because then another boy takes his turn. This may be theology, or kitchen justice, or both. You rest in the guest house while the abbey breathes around you. Bells rise and fade, feet pass, doors open and close. Somewhere, a psalm begins, steady as rain. You understand now that monastery time is not vague at all, though it has no clock face in the way you expect. It is strict, repeating, sacred, and practical. It divides the day into prayer, work, food, silence, and sleep. It lets 100 people share one rhythm without needing each person to own a machine. When you step back into the court, the sun has climbed higher. Your shadow is shorter than it was on the village road. The dog sleeps near the bakehouse, having apparently joined the abbey for reasons of bread. The carter tightens a strap on his load, and the lay brother points you toward the road that leads onward to the market town. Behind you, the bell settles into silence again, but the silence is shaped by it. You carry that ordered sound with you as you leave the abbey gate, walking from sacred portions of time toward the muddier reckoning of buyers, sellers, tolls, shadows, and hungry noon. The road from the abbey slopes between hedges silvered with thaw and you carry the taste of barley pottage and smoked fish on your tongue while the bell behind you dwindles into the morning air. The carter walks beside his load, keeping one eye on the repaired wheel as if it might choose rebellion at any rut. The dog, having failed to take vows at the bakehouse, has returned to your company with a dusting of flour on his nose and the confident trot of an animal who believes all roads eventually lead to kitchens. Ahead, the market town announces itself before its walls appear. You hear it first as a troubled murmur cart axles, geese, voices, hooves, the slap of mud, a woman laughing, a man arguing over something that may be onions or justice. Then the road crests, and you see the gate, the ditch, the clustered roofs beyond, and above them the square tower of the parish church catching the light on one side, while the other remains dark and blue. At the gatehouse, 2 toll collectors sit beneath a patched awning with wax tablets, tally sticks, and expressions carefully trained to notice everything except excuses. A striped pole casts a long shadow across the road. One collector squints at it, then at the line of carts waiting to enter. "Still early enough," he says, and waves forward a woman with baskets of eggs. Early enough for what? He does not say. Early enough for the best place near the church steps. Perhaps. Early enough before the fish smell grows bold. Early enough before the Lord's officer arrives and improves everyone's morning by charging fees more loudly. You wait while the carter pays a market toll in clipped coins and one muttered complaint. The collector marks his tablet with a stylus, then cuts a notch on a stick. Tally sticks are simple things. Bits of wood split or marked to remember debts, payments, and promises. Yet they carry more authority than many spoken oaths. Some swear that a crooked tally invites a crooked soul, and that burning a disputed tally without witnesses brings 7 years of bad bargaining. No one can quite agree whether this is law, superstition, or a merchant's way of frightening apprentices into neat handwriting. Inside the gate, the market square opens like a muddy theatre. Stalls lean beneath cloth awnings, barrels stand beside baskets, hens complain from wicker cages. A fishmonger lays smoked eels in careful rows on a board, while a cheese seller unwraps rounds from linen and watches the crowd with the calm suspicion of a man surrounded by thieves, flies, and customers, which in his mind may be closely related categories. The smell is astonishing. Warm bread, wet wool, horse dung, onions, apples stored too long, tallow smoke, ale, damp leather, and fish making a brave attempt to be remembered by history. You do not see a clock here either. Yet everyone seems to know whether they are late. Merchants read the square the way villagers read doorways. When the sun touches the top of the church porch, the spice seller should have his cloth spread. When the shadow of the market cross lies just short of the well, the first serious buyers arrive. When it reaches the butcher's block, prices begin to soften for goods that must not linger. The square itself is a dial, its stone cross the pointer, its church wall the silent witness, its mud the punishment for hesitation. You drift with the carter toward the middle of the square, where a market cross rises on worn steps. Its carved saints have lost noses to weather, accident, or opinions no one remembers. A woman selling pilgrim badges has set her tray in the sun. Little pewter scallops, keys, crosses, and saints' heads glimmering faintly. One badge shows a local relic kept in a chapel beyond the river, a finger bone said to belong to St. Aldwyn. Though those who tell the tale never fully agree whether St. Aldwyn had quite so many fingers in life as he seems to possess after death, pilgrims buy them anyway. Doubt, you notice, does not always harm business. A bell rings from the parish church, smaller and sharper than the abbey's deep voice. Heads turn, not in surprise but in adjustment. A baker's boy hurries past with a tray of loaves balanced on his shoulder. A wool merchant calls louder. A woman near the well says the bell means her husband has had long enough to find the salt cellar, and if he has instead found the alehouse, time will shortly become painful for him. Medieval time, you begin to understand, is often measured by how long a person may remain missing before someone with a practical temper comes looking. The dog sits near a butcher's scraps bucket, pretending not to stare. His discipline is poor but focused. Around him, other dogs appear, thin, hopeful, and skilled in the art of looking personally betrayed by every uneaten crust. Their patience tells another kind of time. Before the busiest hour, they wait at the edges. When the crowd thickens, they slip beneath tables. When sellers begin packing, they become philosophers of fallen things. You move onward, careful not to trip over baskets, cords, children, or one sleeping goose that has chosen the centre of commerce as its spiritual retreat. Above, the sun climbs, and the shadows under the awnings shrink. The square grows louder. Buyers who came early for choice now haggle for pride. Late comers press in from the gate. A reeve in a fur-lined hood walks between stalls, listening for false measures and sour excuses. He carries an official rod for checking cloth length, and merchants watch it with the same affection mice feel for cats. Near the market cross, a blind singer begins a slow song of a knight who rides 3 days by starlight to reach his lady before Mass. No one can quite agree whether the knight was noble, foolish, or merely lost, but a few coins fall into the singer's bowl. You listen while the crowd moves around you in waves. Here, time is not a bell alone, not a rooster, not a shadow by itself. It is the rising noise of trade, the urgency of sellers before goods spoil, the swell before noon. The toll collector's marks, the reeve's rounds, the sun sliding down the church stones. At last the carter nudges your elbow and points toward the shadow of the market cross, now shorter and tucked close to its base. Soon enough for eating, he says. Your stomach, loyal to ancient methods, agrees at once. The market square still churns around you, but the morning has turned a corner. The bells, shadows, bargains, hungry dogs, and warm smell of bread all begin to lean toward the next portion of the day, when work pauses just long enough for bowls, trenchers, and the heavy comfort of noon. You follow the carter away from the loudest press of the market, slipping between a stall hung with wool hose and another where a woman sells onions in braided ropes like pale, earthy garlands. The sun has climbed until the church tower no longer throws its long morning finger across the square. Its shadow gathers close to the stones, short and dark, as if even shade has grown tired and wants to sit down. Around you, people begin to change their manner. Voices lower a little, bargains slow. Shoulders loosen, hands that have counted coins now reach for bread, cups, knives, and bowls. No one declares noon by number. No one says it is 12. Instead, a bell rings from the parish church, clear and practical, and half the square seems to breathe out at once. A baker wipes flour from his wrists. A porter sets down a sack of oats with the tenderness of a man laying a troublesome child to rest. The fishmonger covers his smoked eels with linen against flies, customers, and fate. The dog looks up from beneath a trestle table, instantly aware that human eating time is the highest form of weather. The carter leads you toward the edge of the square where labourers gather beside a low wall warmed by the sun. A woman ladles pottage from a blackened pot set over a small charcoal brazier, taking coins, promises, and one badly mended glove as payment. Her pottage is thick with barley, cabbage, peas, and a few shreds of bacon that have travelled through the pot without settling anywhere generous. Beside her, a boy cuts coarse bread with a short knife, laying pieces on wooden trenchers darkened by long use. You receive a bowl, a heel of bread, and a place on the wall between the carter and a mason whose tunic is dusted white from lime. Heat rises from the stones, not summer heat, not the cruel hammer of July, but enough warmth to loosen the cold from your knees. The smell of the square changes as food appears: onion steam, ale, warm crust, cheese, smoked fish, sweat under wool, and the sharp vinegar bite of pickled greens. A woman nearby sprinkles salt over her bread and taps 3 grains onto the ground before eating. Some swear this keeps envy from the table, especially when food is scarce and neighbours are close enough to count your crumbs. No one can quite agree whether the charm works, but no one seems eager to stop doing it. You dip bread into the pottage. It is simple, heavy, and welcome. The barley clings to the spoon. The cabbage has surrendered completely. The bacon is more rumour than meat, but the rumour is pleasant. Around you, labourers judge the middle of the day by every sign at once. The mason says the sun is over the church ridge. A drover says his stomach spoke before the bell and is therefore the more reliable witness. A laundress says the bell is best, because stomachs are liars in cold weather. The carter says the road outside the south gate will tell the truth if the mud pulls at the wheel but does not swallow it. There's enough day left to reach the next inn. You look toward the street beyond the square. The muddy ruts shine where the sun touches them. Earlier they were iron hard with frost. Now they have softened into a brown gloss, neither safe nor hopeless. A boy tests one rut with a stick and announces that it is nearly bad, which seems to satisfy everyone. Medieval measurements often sound like poetry written by tired people nearly bad. Good enough, too late for comfort, early if you hurry, late if your master sees you. The church bell fades. In its place comes the softer clatter of eating. Wooden spoons scrape bowls, knives press into cheese. A man drinks small ale from a leather jack and sighs as though forgiven. Near the well, 2 apprentices share beans while arguing over whether a shadow points truer in winter or summer. Even now, it is hard to tell whether their master taught them badly or very well. Above the market cross, pigeons settle and puff themselves into round grey complaints. Beneath them, the reeve also eats, though he does it standing, watching the sellers as if fraud may leap from a cheese rind the moment he turns away. His official measuring rod rests against his knee. A cloth merchant glances at it while biting into an apple, and you can almost hear his thoughts behaving themselves. The dog inches closer to your boot. He has abandoned subtlety. You break off a bit of bread soaked in pottage and drop it beside the wall. He swallows it with reverence, then looks at you as if a sacred covenant has been established. The mason laughs softly and tells you not to feed a road dog unless you wish to acquire a witness, a companion, and a judge. Those who tell such warnings never fully agree whether dogs follow kindness, meat, or destiny. This one seems prepared to accept all three. A group of field hands sits in a patch of sun, their tools laid beside them: billhook, spade, pruning knife, a wooden rake with 2 missing teeth. One man rubs crushed sage on his wrists, saying it helps stiffness and keeps bad air away. The others tease him, though one asks for a pinch when he thinks no one is looking. You listen while the town rests without becoming still. The market continues, but its heartbeat slows. Horses crop hay from nosebags. A child sleeps against a basket of turnips. A pilgrim counts pewter badges on his palm, deciding which saint might protect a sore foot most cheaply. The sun presses down on the square, making the wet patches steam faintly. Bells have marked the pause, but bodies complete it. Midday is in the weight behind your eyes, the warmth on your back, the bowl in your hand, the brief permission to stop. Soon the pause begins to fray. Sellers rise first, because goods do not sell themselves unless they are miracles, and miracles require paperwork from the church. The porter shoulders his sack again with a groan fit for a wounded baron. The laundress gathers her empty cup. The carter tilts his face toward the road, then toward the sun, then toward the repaired wheel. He decides there is time, though not enough to waste discussing it. You wipe your spoon on your bread, finish the last of the pottage, and stand. The shadow of the market cross has begun, almost shyly, to stretch again. Noon has passed without ever needing a number. It came through bell metal, hunger, heat, mud, habit, and the shared silence of people eating together under a pale medieval sun. Now it loosens its hold, and the day leans onward, toward errands, candles, scribes, sand, and all the small devices by which people try to keep time from slipping through their fingers. You leave the market wall with the warmth of pottage still settled in your stomach, and the square resumes its busy churn behind you, though not quite as fiercely as before. The shadow of the market cross has begun to lengthen along the stones, a thin dark finger reaching toward the booths, while the parish bell's last note fades among the roofs. The carter guides his wagon through a side lane, where the mud is quieter, the houses lean closer, and the smell changes from fish, wool, and bargaining to soot, ink, damp timber, and boiled laundry. The dog follows. Of course. He now walks as if he has always belonged to you, which is bold for a creature whose chief achievement this morning has been tactical begging. The repaired cartwheel turns with a faint knock at every third rotation. The carter hears it too and pretends not to, the way people pretend not to hear family members with expensive opinions. You pass beneath a hanging sign painted with a faded quill and a closed book. Beyond its open door is a small writing room where a clerk copies accounts for merchants, letters for those who cannot write, and petitions for those who believe a better-shaped complaint may soften a lord's heart. Inside, light falls through horn-paned windows in dull golden squares. The room smells of ink, scraped parchment, vinegar, old wax, and the faint sourness of men who sit too close to fires in wool. A thin clerk sits at a sloped desk, his fingers stained black around the nails. Beside him lies a sand glass, no taller than your hand, its pale grains slipping from the upper bulb into the lower with a soft, secret patience. He does not use it to command the whole day. That remains the work of bells, light, meals, and obligation. But the sand glass measures small labours, how long ink should dry, how long a messenger may wait before being charged another coin, how long an apprentice must practise letters before his wrist begins to make shapes resembling wounded spiders. The clerk glances at the falling sand and then at a strip of parchment weighted by a smooth stone. Another turning, he murmurs, and reaches for a knife to sharpen his quill. No one can quite agree whether the best quills come from a goose's left wing or right, and some scribes swear the answer depends on whether the writer is right-handed, left-handed, holy, dishonest, or merely unlucky. The clerk says all quills are treacherous, which seems the safest doctrine. A boy nearby chants softly while copying letters on a wax tablet. A, B, C. He breathes, not as a song exactly, but with rhythm enough to keep his hand moving. Psalms work the same way in many places. A prayer learned by heart becomes a measure so many lines before a pause, so many verses while a candle burns, so many familiar words between one task and the next. In a world without little ticking machines, memory keeps its own beat. A servant can know how long to steep herbs by a spoken prayer, a cook can judge boiling by the length of a hymn, a laundress can tell a child to stir until the creed is said twice, which is both spiritual instruction and a clever way to avoid counting. You watch the clerk turn the sandglass. The grains begin again. Time here is visible but fragile. A careless elbow could end it. A damp room could slow it. Badly sifted sand could clump and lie. Some swear that a sandglass placed near a quarrel runs faster, because anger shakes the air. Others say quarrels only make people notice time once they are losing it. Even now, it's hard to tell whether such sayings come from wisdom, boredom, or clerks trapped indoors too long. From the writing room you follow the lane toward a larger timber house, where the carter must deliver a bundle of wool tallies. The household is awake in every corner. A maid kneels by the hearth, feeding split sticks into the fire beneath an iron pot. Another shakes crumbs from a trencher into a bowl for pigs. Rushes are being swept from the hall floor, and fresh ones wait in a basket with dried mint and lavender to sweeten the air. Near the wall, a marked candle stands in an iron holder, its sides scored with shallow rings. As the wax burns down from mark to mark, the household judges the passing of short portions of time. The steward, a square man with a belt full of keys, checks the candle and frowns at it as though wax has moral responsibilities. He says the turnspit boy has been gone too long. The turnspit boy, appearing at that exact moment with a face of wounded innocence, says he was sent to fetch salt. The steward says salt does not require an entire pilgrimage. The dog, hearing the word salt and misunderstanding it completely, looks hopeful. Marked candles are costly enough that poorer homes use rushlights, hearth embers, shadows, songs, or stomachs. Beeswax burns cleaner and sweeter than tallow, but it belongs mostly to churches, wealthy halls, and people who enjoy smelling faintly of honey while reminding everyone else of their status. Tallow candles smoke, sputter, and smell of rendered fat, which makes them less elegant but more honest about the animal world from which they came. You stand near the hearth while the maid stirs the pot. She times the thickening of the sauce by the candle mark and by the sound of bubbles breaking at the surface. She also drops in a bundle of herbs tied with thread sage, parsley, and a little rue, because the mistress believes rue helps against sour stomach and envious glances. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether rue truly protects anyone, but everyone agrees it tastes bitter enough to frighten something away. In the corner, an elderly woman spins wool with a drop spindle, her fingers moving in steady rhythm. Twist, draw, drop, wind, twist, draw, drop, wind. She needs no bell for this. Her body measures the work, She says she can tell the hour by how far the light has crawled across the chest near the door, and by whether her grandson has begun asking for food again. A child's appetite, she says, divides the day more reliably than any abbot. This is difficult to dispute. The carter hands over his tallies. The steward marks a wax tablet, and the candle shrinks another narrow step. Outside, the afternoon waits, pale and damp. You feel how many small inventions hold this world together. Candles cut with rings, sand glasses turned by ink-stained fingers, psalms murmured over pots, remembered shadows on floors, and tasks bound to prayers so they do not drift apart. None of these things is perfect. Wax gutters, sand clumps. A song may be sung too quickly by a hungry boy. A servant may claim the creed was longer yesterday. Yet together they keep bread from burning, ink from smearing, herbs from steeping too long, and households from falling entirely into confusion. When you step back into the lane, the dog slips out beside you, the cartwheel knocks softly, and the afternoon light lies lower against the walls. Behind you, the marked candle continues to burn in the warm hall, patient and golden, losing itself ring by ring. Ahead, clouds gather over the gatehouse, and a smell of rain moves through the town, ready to blur shadows, swallow bells, and make time wander again. You reach the gatehouse just as the first heavy drops strike the lane, darkening the dust in round spots that spread and meet one another like ink on cheap parchment. The carter looks up, sniffs once, and says a wordless thing that means every road between here and supper has just become personal. The dog shakes himself before he's even properly wet, which seems unfairly dramatic, and then sneezes at the sky as if the weather has insulted him. Within moments, the rain thickens. It drums on thatch, clatters on shutters, hisses in hearth smoke, and runs down the sloped stones of the lane in little brown streams. A woman snatches linen from a rail. A boy gathers baskets beneath an awning. A butcher covers his block with sacking. The market square behind you blurs into movement and shadow, its careful measures of sunlight suddenly erased. The shadow of the church tower vanishes. The market cross no longer points anywhere. Noon, afternoon. Early, late, all the tidy names grow damp at the edges. The gatehouse arch offers shelter, and you duck beneath it with the carter, 2 porters, a woman carrying a basket of dyed yarn, and a pilgrim whose cloak smells strongly of wet sheep. The guard at the gate pulls the oak door partly closed to keep the worst of the weather from sweeping through. Iron hinges groan. Water pours from the roof in silver ropes. Someone has laid rushes near the inner wall, but they are already dark with mud from many boots. A brazier smokes in the corner, giving off more opinion than heat. Here, time begins to wander. When the sky is clear, people read it with confidence. They watch shadows, roof lines, church walls, the colour of the road. But rain steals the visible sun and makes every hour resemble the one before it. The porters argue whether it is closer to none or still nearer Sext, though neither man sounds convinced. The yarn seller says the bell should have rung by now. The guard says bells are hard to hear in rain, especially with water hammering on the tiles. The pilgrim says St. Aldwyn once rang a bell through a storm so fierce that fish were found in a hayloft, though no one can quite agree whether the fish were miraculous, misplaced, or merely the work of a storyteller with confidence. You lean against the cold wall and listen. Rain fills the archway with a steady hush, loud and soft at once. It beats the world flat. Cartwheels outside move slowly through mud, their rims making a thick sucking sound. Horses lower their heads, cloaks darken and cling. Wet wool gives off its deep, sour warmth, a smell that seems to belong equally to travellers, sheep, and regret. The carter checks the repaired wheel again, touching the iron pin as if it were a holy relic no one entirely trusts. A bell does sound at last, or perhaps you imagine it through the rain. It comes thin and distant, broken into pieces by wind. Heads lift. The guard says that was the parish bell. The pilgrim says it came from the Abbey Road. The yarn seller says it was only a loose shutter banging. And she says this with the weary authority of someone who has carried a basket through weather and will not be lied to by architecture. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about bells heard in storms. Rain makes saints, towers, shutters, and nervous hearts sound strangely alike. With no clear light to guide them, people fall back on smaller signs. The guard judges by how long the brazier has been fed. The carter judges by hunger returning too soon, which he blames on wet cold. The porters judge by the number of carts that have passed since the rain began. The woman with yarn touches the damp thread at the edge of her basket and says, "If it does not clear soon, the dye will bleed before she reaches home." Her time is not sacred office or shadow but colour threatening to run. A child from the gatekeeper's room peers around a hanging cloth and watches the rainwater spill from the eaves into a barrel. His grandmother tells him not to count raindrops, or he will invite a long storm. Some swear children who count rain make clouds linger out of vanity. Others say the warning exists because adults enjoy stopping children from doing anything too quietly. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the grandmother believes it. But the child stops counting and begins poking the dog instead. The dog accepts this with saintly patience until no food appears. The gatehouse becomes a small world. A porter unwraps bread from a cloth and shares a hard corner with his companion. The pilgrim rubs his sore ankle with a salve of comfrey and goose grease, claiming it draws out aches gathered from bad roads. The guard turns a damp glove inside out near the brazier and tells you that rain before Vespers means mud by morning, but rain after Vespers means fog. The carter says this is nonsense. The guard says he has stood in this arch for 12 winters and knows the moods of weather better than men who chase wheels across ditches. Their quarrel is gentle, worn smooth by repetition. You look beyond the arch. The road outside the gate has changed from path to substance. Mud gathers in shining ridges. Hoofprints fill with water. The ditch runs high and brown. Travellers wait beneath trees, under carts, beside walls, each one suspended between going and staying. Without clocks, delay is felt in the body first, damp creeping through socks, fingers stiffening, stomach asking questions, shoulders aching beneath a cloak. Time becomes not a number but discomfort carefully endured. At last the rain softens from drumming to whispering. Light returns, not sunlight exactly, but a grey brightness behind the clouds. The market cross appears again through the wet air. Its shadow is weak, almost useless, but present. The guard steps to the arch, looks at the road, then at the western sky, then spits thoughtfully into the mud. "Still enough day," he says. That is all the permission anyone receives. The porters lift their loads. The yarn seller gathers her basket beneath her cloak. The pilgrim tightens his belt. The carter clicks his tongue to the horse, and the repaired wheel rolls forward with its familiar little knock, sounding braver than it looks. You step from the gatehouse into the softened road, feeling mud take hold of your boots. Behind you, rainwater still drips from the arch in slow, uneven drops, each one marking no exact hour at all. yet reminding you that the day has moved while you waited, ahead, beyond wet hedges and shining ruts. The road bends toward darker trees, where the forest will ask its own quiet questions before evening bells. The road beyond the gate grows quieter with every step, as if the rain has washed the market noise from the world and left only the soft things behind the suck of mud at your heels. The creak of the cart, the drip of hedges, the horse's damp breathing, and the faint knock of the repaired wheel turning beside you. The town walls sink back into grey distance. Ahead, the trees gather close, bare branches interlaced like old fingers, their trunks dark with wet, their roots gripping the bank where the road narrows into a forest track. You pull your cloak tighter. Wet wool has become part of your very being now, a second skin with opinions. The dog trots near your left boot, pausing now and then to sniff at puddles, hoof prints, and mysteries best left unexamined. The carter says little. He watches the sky through the branches where the light is already beginning to thin. It is not evening yet, not properly, but the forest makes every hour feel later. Under trees, the day loses confidence. A woodcutter appears ahead, coming down the track with a bundle of split branches tied across his back. He wears a hood of rough brown cloth, and his beard is beaded with rain. An axe hangs from his belt, its iron head wrapped in sacking against the wet. He nods to the carter and asks if the town bell is rung none. The carter says he heard something before the rain softened, but rain lies. The woodcutter grunts, looks at the western brightness behind the trees, and says there is time before vespers if feet behave and wheels remember their duties. The wheel knocks once, as if offended. You follow the track deeper beneath the branches. The forest smells of soaked bark, leaf mould, horse sweat, and faint smoke from somewhere unseen. Water drops from twigs onto your hood in cold taps. Birds move overhead, hidden in the grey-brown tangle. A blackbird calls once, then again. Farther off, a jay shrieks with the unnecessary drama of a tax collector finding unpaid dues. The woodcutter tells you jays scold harder when strangers pass, and some swear they warn not only birds but spirits. Thieves and charcoal burners with debts. No one can quite agree whether this is woodland wisdom or simply a jay enjoying a busy afternoon. At a bend in the track, you pass a charcoal burner's clearing. The ground is blackened and soft, ringed with poles, stacked wood, and low earth-covered mounds that smoke through little vents. A man crouches beside one mound, adjusting damp turf with a hooked stick. His face is smudged so dark that only his eyes and teeth show clearly when he nods. Charcoal burning is work done by patience and smoke, by watching without leaving, by knowing when a mound breathes too fast or too slow. His time is not kept by bells, for the bells are muffled here. It is kept by the colour of smoke, the warmth beneath a palm, and the number of times a man must circle the mound before trusting it through dusk. He offers the carter a strip of dried apple and warns that the ford ahead is swollen. The carter thanks him and asks whether pilgrims pass this way. The burner points with his chin. 3, perhaps 4, with badges on their hats and one limping hard. They hurried when the crows began flying homeward. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether crows know sunset better than men. But in a forest, you do not argue with anything that has wings, height, and a clear view of the horizon. You move on. The track dips, rises, and twists between trunks thick with moss. The mud here is darker, slick over roots and stones. Once, your boot slides sideways, and you catch yourself against the cart, leaving a brown print on the wood. The carter says the road was laid better in his grandfather's day. This is a thing all roads have apparently suffered. They were once finer, straighter, drier, and travelled by more respectful people. Medieval memory, like medieval mud, tends to deepen with use. A small roadside shrine stands beneath an oak, no higher than your shoulder, roofed with 2 cracked tiles and holding a painted figure of St. Christopher carrying the Christ child through water. Rain has blurred the saint's face, and someone has hung a string of beads on one wooden peg. A pilgrim badge lies at the base, bent and muddy, perhaps lost, perhaps offered. The carter touches 2 fingers to his brow. The woodcutter, still with you for part of the way, mutters that travellers should greet St. Christopher before dark, especially near water. Some swear seeing his image in the morning protects a person from sudden death that day. Others say the promise works only if you look properly, pray properly, and do not then behave like a fool near a ford. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the saint protects the careful, or whether careful people simply give saints less work. The dog sniffs the shrine, sneezes, and accepts no theology from it. A little farther on, the forest opens just enough to show the sky. The light has changed. The grey has cooled toward blue. Shadows gather beneath carts and roots. You begin to understand the quiet urgency around you. In open fields, the sun lowers plainly. In town, bells tell people when to quicken or rest. In an abbey, prayer shapes the day like stone around a cloister. But here, the forest asks you to notice smaller warnings, birds going still, smoke flattening, damp cold rising from hollows, the sudden feeling that every tree has stepped closer. You hear voices ahead and soon come upon the pilgrims the charcoal burner mentioned. 3 of them wait near a fallen branch, 1 older man with a staff, 1 woman wrapped in a patch cloak, and a younger fellow trying to adjust a sandal strap with fingers too cold for neat work. Their badges show scallop shells and a little pewter key. The limping man rubs his ankle with a cloth soaked in vinegar and crushed betony, saying it draws out weariness. The woman says betony is good for the head. The heart and road sickness, if gathered on the right day and not by a person with a quarrelsome tongue. No one asks how one tests the tongue of a herb gatherer. Some knowledge is safer left folded. They ask if you travel toward the hall near the mill stream. The carter says he hopes to reach it before Vespers, and the word moves through the little group like a handbell. Vespers means evening prayer, but for travellers it also means lamps being lit, gates being watched, bread being claimed, benches filling, and latecomers receiving the worst straw near the door. You all begin walking together. The forest track grows dimmer. A thrush sings once from a high branch, a liquid phrase slipping through the wet air, then falls silent. The older pilgrim says birds know when the angels fold the day. The carter says birds know when foxes begin work. Both explanations make you walk a little faster. At last, through the trees, you hear a bell, faint, softened by wet branches and distance, but unmistakable. It might be the abbey behind you, or a parish ahead, or perhaps only memory ringing in your bones after such a long day of listening. Those who tell such journeys never fully agree, yet the sound steadies your steps. The forest thins. Smoke appears beyond the trunks. Somewhere ahead, a roof waits, and hearthlight, and perhaps a place where even a suspicious monk, a cracked wheel, a tired pilgrim, and a flower-nosed dog may be allowed to settle before dark. The roof you saw through the trees proves to be part of a long timber hall crouched beside a mill stream, its thatch dark with rain and its walls patched with wattle, daub, and patient repairs. Smoke leaks from a roof hole in a wavering blue ribbon, then bends sideways in the damp air as if the evening itself is breathing out. The track widens into a churned yard where carts stand wheel-deep in mud. Hens scratch beneath a lean-to, and a thin horse lowers its head into a nosebag with the solemn relief of a scholar finding the correct manuscript. You step into the yard with the carter, the pilgrims, and the dog, who immediately behaves as though he has personally discovered civilization. A servant boy runs from the stable with a lantern, its horn panels glowing dull amber. He looks at the carter's wheel, at your wet cloak, at the pilgrim's tired feet, and then toward the hall door, where warmth flickers around the edges. He says supper has begun, but not ended, which may be the most merciful phrase you have heard all day. Inside, the smoky hall wraps around you at once. Heat rolls from the central hearth, thick and uneven. The rafters above are soot-black and half lost in shadow, their beams hung with drying herbs, strings of onions, and a few strips of smoked meat guarded from cats by height rather than faith. Rushes cover the packed floor, fresh in patches, older in corners, and fragrant where someone has thrown down mint and sweet woodruff. Wet cloaks steam near the door. Boots scrape. Wooden cups knock on tables. Somewhere, someone laughs very softly, then coughs because the smoke dislikes merriment unless properly paid. There is no clock here. There is a hearth. The fire tells the hall what portion of the evening it has reached. When the flames leap high, late arrivals may still hope for warm food. When the wood collapses into red coals, bread grows scarce and bowls are scraped clean. When ash spreads pale over the embers, servants begin looking at strangers with the gentle firmness of people who want them asleep somewhere that's not in the way. The mistress of the hall, a broad-shouldered woman with keys at her belt, stands near the hearth and measures supper by flame, pot, custom, and rank. You are not first, and you are certainly not grand. This matters. At the high end of the room, beneath a wall hanging faded by smoke, sit the miller, his wife, two local men of substance, and a priest whose expression suggests he has endured many meals and judged most of them silently. They eat from trenchers of stale bread laid on boards, with better ale in a glazed jug. Lower down, travellers share benches, bowls, and whatever dignity survives wet socks. A servant brings you pottage thickened with oats, leeks, and turnip, with a piece of coarse bread that is hardened enough to require either strong teeth or firm moral purpose. There is smoked fish too, salty and dark, passed in small pieces so no one grows hopeful. The carter receives a larger portion after explaining the repaired wheel, the bad ford, and the rain, as if misfortune itself should be weighed at supper. The pilgrims sit close to the hearth, drying their cloaks and murmuring thanks over their bowls. Some swear that if a traveller reaches a hall before the first great log falls inward, he has arrived under a fortunate sign. Others say that depends entirely on whether the cook likes strangers. No one can quite agree. But when a charred log cracks and settles in a shower of sparks, everyone near the hearth glances up as though the fire has made an announcement. The mistress nods to a maid, and the maid lifts the pot away from the strongest heat. Supper has shifted from serving to saving. You eat slowly. The warmth travels into your fingers, your wrists, your chest. The pottage is plain, but after the forest road it tastes almost noble. The bread softens when pressed into the bowl. Ale follows, small and sour, poured from a wooden pitcher into a cup that has known many mouths and chosen forgiveness. Around you, the hall keeps time in human ways. The servants move faster while the flames are bright. The priest finishes before the miller's wife rises. The best scraps go first to those of rank, then to paying travellers, then to household servants, then to dogs who have mastered the tragic stare. Your dog has, unfortunately, mastered it. He sits beside your foot with eyes deep enough to drown a bishop's resolve. You give him a thread of fish skin. He accepts it without surprise, as though this arrangement was written into canon law. Near the hearth, the younger pilgrim loosens his sandal and rubs his ankle again, while the older one tells a low story about a shrine where the bell rings by itself before storms. The priest says bells do not ring by themselves. The miller says his granary door once opened by itself, and that was before 3 sacks went missing. The priest says hinges are not miracles. The hall considers this. Those who tell such tales never fully agree whether priests have less imagination than millers, or merely better locks. The mistress orders fresh rushes thrown near the benches where travellers will sleep. Sleeping places are not chosen randomly. Rank lies closer to warmth, family closer to walls, servants where they can rise quickly, and wanderers wherever space remains after custom has had its say. A place too near the door means draughts. Too near the hearth means smoke and sparks. Too near the dog means fleas, though the dog seems personally wounded by the accusation. Above, the rafters darken as evening gathers fully outside. You cannot see the sun now, only the slow loss of brightness at the shutter cracks and the deeper glow of the fire taking command. A half-burned candle stands near the high table, its wax sagging just as the one did in the guest house before dawn. This one is tallow, not beeswax, and it smells accordingly, but its little flame still draws faces from shadow and marks the evening in its own soft, wasting way. A maid begins humming while she gathers empty bowls. The tune is steady, perhaps a psalm, perhaps a work song, perhaps only the sound she uses to keep her hands from forgetting their order. She stacks trenchers, wipes the board with a cloth, checks the pot, nudges a sleepy child away from the rushes, and glances again at the candle. The hall has no numbered hour, yet everyone feels the next change coming. Food gives way to stories. Stories will give way to yawns. Yawns will give way to blankets. Locked doors, banked embers, and the long dark portion of the world. You sit with your back to a post, boots stretched toward the warmth, damp cloak steaming beside you. The repaired wheel rests outside in the mud. The suspicious relic badge on the pilgrim's hat glints when the fire catches it. The smell of wet wool, smoke, ale, fish, rushes, and old timber settles around you like a heavy blanket. Beyond the hall walls, rainwater drips from the thatch, and the mill stream moves unseen through the dark. Inside, the hearth keeps its slow red count, and you let yourself sink into it. Bowl empty, hands warm, eyes following sparks upward into the soot-soft rafters. The hall sinks by slow degrees from supper into night, not all at once, but in small softenings you can feel more than see. The bowls are gathered, the last trenchers are scraped. The priest's voice fades into a low murmur near the high table, and the miller's wife counts keys at her belt before handing one to a servant with a warning so quiet it sounds almost kind. The rushes near the door are stirred flat for sleeping places, and cloaks are folded into poor but welcome pillows above. The rafters hold the smoke like an old secret. You're nearly ready to settle beside the post when the carter rises to check his horse, his wheel, and whatever other worries have survived supper. You follow him outside because your legs have stiffened. Your cloak still smells of rain, and the night air beyond the hall door seems, for a moment, cleaner than the warm mixture of tallow, fish, wool, and human fatigue indoors. The dog wakes at once and comes with you, since he believes every movement may lead to bread or destiny. The yard is dark, but not empty. The rain has stopped. Water drips from the thatch in slow beads. The mud shines faintly wherever firelight falls from the open door. Beyond the mill stream, the trees stand black and close, and farther off, somewhere through the fields, you see the dim line of a town wall against the sky. A watchfire burns near a gate tower there, small from this distance, orange as a coal in a great bowl of blue-black night. The carter checks the wheel by lantern light, touching the iron pin again. It holds. He grunts, which may be satisfaction or merely the absence of despair. Then a watchman from the nearby wall road calls from the lane, asking whether travellers have come in from the forest. He carries a staff, a horn at his belt, and a lantern with horn panes clouded by smoke. His cloak is patched at the shoulders, and his cap is pulled low. Beside him walks another dog, leaner than yours and far more official in expression. You go with him a little way toward the watchfire, boots careful in the dark ruts. Night travel is not wise, but a few steps under local company are allowed, especially when curiosity has already survived wet wool, market tolls, and pottage with ambitious turnips. The lane rises toward the outer earthwork where men keep a night watch for the hall, the mill, and the road bend. Not every place has stone walls. Some have ditches, timber palisades, thorn hedges, watch platforms, and the firm belief that shouting loudly in the dark is a form of architecture. At the fire, 2 guards sit on low stools, their spears leaning nearby, their faces red on one side and shadowed on the other. A pot of weak ale warms near the embers. One man has wrapped his feet in extra cloth against the cold. The other holds a string of knots and slides one knot between his fingers now and then. He says it helps mark the turns of the watch, though no one can quite agree how long a proper turn should be when the night is bitter, the moon is hidden, and the man expected to relieve you has a talent for sleeping like a blessed stone. Here, again, there is no clock. The night is divided by watches: first watch, middle watch, last watch, though the names shift from place to place like mud under cartwheels. Some men count by bells drifting from distant churches. Some count by the sinking of certain stars. Some count by how far a candle has burned inside the gatehouse. Some count by how numb their toes have become, which is not approved by scholars, but has a persuasive honesty. A bell sounds far away, softened by distance and damp fields. The guards pause. One says it is from the abbey. Another says it is the parish church. The watchman with the horn says it is only the mill chain knocking in the stream. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about night bells, because darkness makes every sound wear a hood. Still, each man adjusts himself after hearing it. One adds wood to the fire. One stands and walks the edge of the ditch. One lifts his lantern and peers toward the road. The dog beside you sits close to the warmth, while the official dog stands facing the dark with pricked ears. Your dog appears to admire this discipline but does not intend to imitate it. The guards speak softly about habits meant to keep the night orderly. A watchman must not whistle after midnight, says one, or he may call wandering things that do not answer like men. Another says whistling is harmless, but counting stars aloud invites bad dreams. The oldest guard says both rules were invented by men who wanted young fools to keep quiet. Even now, it is hard to tell whether he dismisses the superstition or simply knows better than to test it. He carries a little pouch of dried mugwort and yarrow, tied with wool thread, said to keep weariness away if warmed in the hand. The younger guard laughs at it until the old man offers to lend it to him during the coldest part of the night, and then the laughing stops with impressive speed. Medieval doubt, you notice, often ends where comfort begins. You stand near the fire and look up. Clouds move apart, revealing a scatter of stars above the bare branches. Not enough for travel yet. Not like the clear road of stars pilgrims will follow later, but enough to remind the watchman that the sky has its own slow order. One guard points to a bright star low above the dark field and says when it drops behind the oak, his turn should be near done. The other says the oak has 3 tall branches and no man agrees which one counts. This seems to be a long-standing legal matter among people with cold feet. Below the rise, the hall glows through shutter cracks. Inside, sleepers are finding places among rushes, wool blankets, benches and corners. Servants bank the hearth so embers last until dawn. The mistress bars the door with an oak beam. Iron keys turn in locks. A child cries once, then quiets. The night gathers around all of it. Wall, ditch, stable, mill, hall, road, trees. The watchmen do not defeat the dark, they bargain with it. They feed the fire, they listen for hooves, wheels, foxes, drunken songs, loose shutters, and things that might be wolves but are usually pigs with poor timing. They trade short tales to stay awake. They stamp their feet. They measure their lives in turns that blur at the edges, waiting for bells, stars, replacement men, and the first grey loosening of morning. At last, the carter says you had better return before the door is barred against you and your sleeping place becomes under a cart, which he presents as a medical warning. You thank the watchman and walk back down the lane, the dog padding beside you, the fire shrinking behind. As you re-enter the smoky hall, the warmth folds over you again. You find your place among the rushes, wrap your cloak tight, and listen through the wall to the faint horn of the watchman, the drip from the eaves, and the slow unseen counting of the medieval night. You do not sleep deeply. The hall is warm enough to keep you alive, but not generous enough to make you graceful, and the rushes beneath your cloak crackle whenever you turn. Around you, travellers breathe in uneven rhythms. Someone mutters in a dream. A child sighs near the wall. The hearth, banked under ash, glows with a low red patience, and the half-burned tallow candle near the high table has gone out, leaving only a crooked thread of smoke and the faint smell of fat in the dark. Somewhere beyond the wall, the watchman's horn sounds once low and brief. It does not startle the hall so much as remind it that the world outside still exists. The dog, curled against your ankle as if appointed to guard your left boot, lifts his head, considers the horn, then lowers it again. His faith in human vigilance is touching but limited. Before dawn fully thinks of returning, a pilgrim stirs beside the hearth. It is the older man from the forest road, the one with the staff polished by many miles and the pewter badges sewn along his hat brim. He sits up quietly, touching his sore knee, then reaches for his cloak. The younger pilgrim follows, wincing over his ankle, and the woman folds her blanket with practiced care. They mean to leave before the hall wakes properly, while the night road still holds its cold firmness and the next shrine can be reached before the day grows muddy. The carter grumbles from under his cloak that only saints and fools rise at such an hour. The older pilgrim says he has met both on the road and prefers the saints because they ask fewer questions. You pull yourself upright, stiff and smoky, and decide to go with them for a while. The repaired wheel can wait for daylight. Your curiosity, unfortunately, has no such discipline. Outside, the yard lies under a clear sky washed clean by the earlier rain. Stars shine above the black line of trees, bright and cold as pinpricks in dark blue cloth. The moon hangs low, not full, but strong enough to silver the puddles and lay pale edges along the cart wheels, the stable roof, the mill stream, and the road leading away from the hall. Your breath rises in little clouds. The wet wool of your cloak has chilled again, reminding you that comfort in the Middle Ages is often a temporary misunderstanding. The pilgrims gather near the roadside shrine at the edge of the yard. The older man touches his fingers to the St. Christopher badge on his hat, then looks up at the stars. He does not possess a clock. He does not need one for this portion of the journey. He knows that when the moon has leaned past the bare ash tree and a certain bright star stands over the road bend, it is time enough to walk. No one can quite agree whether the star is named properly by scholars, sailors, shepherds, or grandmothers, but the pilgrims trust it all the same. You step onto the road with them. The mud has stiffened in the night cold, and your boots find the ridges easier than they did after the rain. The dog follows at once, though he looks disappointed that the destination is not visibly edible. Behind you, the hall grows smaller, its shutter cracks dim with banked embers. Ahead, the pilgrim road lies pale in the moonlight, running between fields, hedges, and the dark shoulder of the forest. For a while, no one speaks. The road itself seems to ask for quiet. Frost begins to form along the grass tips. Somewhere in a field, a sheep coughs, which is not poetic, but it is honest. Your staff taps now and then against stones. The older pilgrim walks by memory, counting not minutes but landmarks: the split oak, the low bridge, the shrine with the broken roof, the hill where the wind always strikes from the west. Distance in this world is not only measured in miles, it is measured in how long your feet ache, how many prayers are said, how many songs can be sung before the next village, how many times a lame man must stop and pretend he is admiring the view. The younger pilgrim asks whether you will reach St. Aldwyn's chapel by morning. The woman says perhaps by terce if the ford is kind, perhaps by sext if the ford has opinions. The older man says the chapel bell rings differently on feast days, because the saint listens more closely then. Some swear that certain saints' bells carry farther on the eve of their feast, especially to those who have walked honestly and paid their vows. Others say bells carry farther when the wind comes down the valley and the ringer has strong arms. Even now, it is hard to tell which explanation gives more comfort. You pass a low stone cross leaning at the roadside, half sunk into the earth. Someone has tied a strip of blue cloth around it, faded by rain. The pilgrim woman pauses to tuck a pebble at its base. She says it is for safe miles ahead. The older man says his mother never passed a road cross without leaving something, even if only a thread or a whispered paternoster. The younger one says if every shrine, cross, and chapel asks for a token, a pilgrim may arrive holy but naked. This earns him a look sharp enough to mend his manners. Above, the stars remain steady. The older pilgrim points with his staff toward a cluster low in the sky and says it helps him keep the road eastward before dawn. He learned it from a sailor who learned it from a shepherd who may have learned it from someone who liked sounding certain. Those who tell such things never fully agree, but the road does bend where he says it will. You begin to understand that stars, like bells, are shared knowledge. Few people can explain them as masters in universities might, yet many can use them enough to survive a dark road, find a coast, judge a season, or keep fear from growing too large. The moon slips behind a cloud for a moment, and the whole road softens into shadow. Everyone slows. Your ears grow sharper. You hear the stream before you see it, the whisper and cold chuckle of water over stones. The older pilgrim says water at night is best crossed after a prayer and before doubt. No one argues. You reach the little bridge, made of planks slick with frost, and cross one at a time. The dog goes first, which may be courage or poor understanding of consequences. On the far side, the sky begins to pale at its lowest edge, not dawn yet, but a thinning of darkness. The pilgrims murmur a psalm under their breath. The rhythm steadies their walking. Prayer becomes time again, verse after verse, step after step. The body held inside remembered words. Your own thoughts grow quieter. The day ahead has not yet opened into markets, bells, manor courts, rents, and fields. For now, there is only the pilgrim road, the moon behind cloud, the stars above hedges, the cold breath of travellers, and the old human habit of finding direction in the dark. You walk on until the first bird calls from a thorn bush. The older pilgrim smiles as if the world has kept an appointment. Behind you, night gathers itself away from the fields. Ahead, somewhere beyond the next rise, a village waits with its church, its storehouses, its feast day reckonings, and all the longer measures by which people understand not merely an hour, but a season, a debt, a harvest, and a life. The first bird is followed by another, and then by the thin, uncertain chorus of morning finding its courage among the hedges. You walk with the pilgrims as the sky lightens from iron blue to pearl, and the road begins to show its ordinary face again, ruts filled with pale water, tufts of frost-bitten grass, stones pressed into mud by generations of feet, hooves, wheels, and prayers. Behind you, the night watch and smoky hall feel almost like something dreamed beside embers. Ahead, beyond the low rise, the village appears in pieces, first the church tower, then the thatched roofs, then the pale strips of field lying under frost like folded cloth. A bell rings from the little church, not deep like the abbey bell, not sharp like the market bell, but homely, uneven, and cracked. The pilgrim woman crosses herself. The older man says it is a good sound before breakfast. The younger one says any bell before breakfast is making promises it cannot keep. The dog, hearing no ladle, remains cautious. You descend into the manor village as doors open and smoke begins to lift. This place does not only keep the hour of a day, it keeps the longer turning of the year. You can feel it in the fields, in the stacked hurdles, in the barn doors, in the low granary raised on stones against damp and rats. The village measures life by saints' days, rents, harvest tasks, court summons, lambing, brewing, ploughing, fasting, feasting, and the weather signs everyone claims to understand until the weather proves otherwise. Near the churchyard wall, a reeve stands with a wax tablet and a bundle of notched sticks tucked under one arm. His cloak is lined with rabbit fur, worn thin at the edges, and his face has the careful patience of a man who remembers who owes hens, who owes labour, and who has suddenly developed a mysterious cough every time ditch clearing is mentioned. Today, he says, men from 3 holdings must come after Mass to mend the Lord's hedge near the east field. Not because a clock commands it, but because the season does. If the hedge is not laid before the sap rises, it will grow wild and weak. If the ditch is not cleared before spring rain, the lower strips will flood. If rent hens are not delivered by the proper feast, the manor court will remember. No one can quite agree whether St. Hilary's Day is a fairer marker for the deep cold than St. Agnes's Day, and several villagers seem ready to defend their preferred saint with startling passion. An old woman by the well says that if the sun shines clear on Candlemas, winter has another bite hidden in its sleeve. A ploughman says that is nonsense unless the wind is from the east. A boy says his father judges spring by when frogs begin shouting in the marsh. The old woman says frogs are not theologians. The boy says they are louder than priests. This is not well received, though the dog appears interested in frogs as a subject. You pause near the well while women draw water, sleeves rolled above red wrists. One has tied a bit of green thread around her bucket handle to keep the water sweet. Some swear that a bucket first drawn after dawn on certain feast days can heal sore eyes, especially if carried home without speaking. Others say the silence matters less than not dropping the bucket into mud. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the charm heals the eyes, the discipline, or the mood of the household. The pilgrims take bread from a woman selling small loaves near the church porch. You buy one too, dark and coarse, still warm at the centre. Beside it, she offers cheese wrapped in dock leaves and a cup of thin ale. Her husband, she tells you, has gone to check the winter storehouse because the apples are softening early. That is a kind of clock as well. Apples fading, onions sprouting, smoked fish drying too hard, grain sinking in the bin, ale turning sour. Hay running low before the grass returns. A household reads its stores the way a clerk reads parchment. Each barrel and basket whispers how much winter remains. You walk past the open barn where 2 men fork straw down from a loft. A girl scatters grain for hens. A boy carries a wooden yoke with 2 empty pails. The smell is rich and close hay dust, cow breath, old leather, damp wool, smoke, and the sour warmth of penned animals. Above the barn door hangs a horseshoe, points upward to hold luck like water in a bowl. The younger pilgrim asks whether luck spills if the shoe is turned downward. The barn girl says only if a fool hangs it that way, with such confidence that the matter feels settled. After Mass, the village gathers near the manor court bench beneath an ash tree, where the reeve and steward hear small disputes. A hen owed at Martinmas but delivered late, a boundary stone moved by frost, accident, or ambition, a widow's right to gather deadwood, a mill fee disputed because the miller's measure is said to have grown hungry. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether manor courts preserve justice, order, memory, or the Lord's purse. But everyone attends because absence itself becomes a story, and stories here have weight. You stand at the edge, listening while the cracked church bell quiets above you. Here, time stretches beyond the body's hunger and the sun's angle. It lives in obligations returning year after year. Michaelmas rents, Lammas loaves. Rogation walks around field boundaries, when villagers beat the bounds so even children remember where one holding ends and another begins. Harvest when the grain bends gold. Advent fasting, Christmas ale, Lent's lean bowls, Easter fires. The year is a great wheel, and every saint, field, debt, and feast is a peg upon its rim. By mid-morning, the frost is gone from the sunny side of the churchyard. The pilgrims prepare to continue towards St. Aldwyn's chapel, comparing sore feet, promised prayers, and the distance to the next shrine. The older man buys another badge, though its saintly bone remains suspicious in number and origin. The dog receives a crust from the bread woman and, in return, offers the village nothing but his presence, which he clearly considers sufficient. You look back at the fields before leaving. A man tests the soil in his palm. A woman studies clouds over the ridge. Children chase hens away from seed baskets. The reeve tucks his tallies close. The cracked bell rests in silence until it is needed again. And you understand that medieval people survive without clocks not only by reading the day, but by belonging to a calendar made of saints, seasons, debts, hunger, weather, and work. The road waits beyond the last cottage, and with the pilgrims, a carter's distant wheel, and your faithful beggar of a dog somewhere near your heel, you move onward toward the colder authority of lordly time. The road from the manor village climbs by slow degrees, leaving the church bell, the court bench, and the cracked little tower behind you, until they seem less like places and more like sounds folded into the morning. The pilgrims turn towards St. Aldwyn's chapel with their badges glinting faintly in the pale light, and for a while you walk with them between hedges, past wet fields and bare orchards, until the track divides near a stone marker furred with moss. The older pilgrim raises his staff in farewell. The younger one limps bravely, though his ankle clearly has opinions. The woman gives the dog one last crust and tells him to choose his company wisely, which he ignores with the serene confidence of a creature who chooses by smell. You turn instead with the carter toward the Lord's keep, where he must deliver a message carried from the market steward and ask whether the north road is safe under the Lord's protection. The repaired wheel knocks softly behind you, a familiar little heartbeat now, and the carter mutters that if the Lord's men were as punctual as damaged wood, the shire would prosper. By late afternoon, the keep rises ahead on a low hill, square and stern against a dimming sky. It is not a fairy tale castle with banners behaving themselves in clean wind. It is colder, heavier, more practical, a stone tower, timber outbuildings, a ditch wet with brown water, a gatehouse with murder holes overhead, and a yard churned by hooves. Smoke lifts from kitchen roofs. Crows settle on the palisade. A torch burns beside the gate, though the sun has not fully gone, because stone drinks light early and lordly doorways prefer to look dramatic. You wait outside the gate with other people who have business and no power to hurry it. A tenant with 2 hens in a basket, a reeve from another village holding tallies under his cloak, a woman bringing linen for the household laundry, a groom leading a tired horse with mud up its legs. Everyone watches the gate as if patience might open it. It does not. No one can quite agree whether waiting at a lord's gate should be counted as work, prayer, punishment, or weather. It has elements of all 4. The wind slides over the hill and finds every gap in your cloak. Your hands grow cold. The dog curls near a cart wheel, then uncurls when he realizes no one has dropped food. Inside the walls, you hear shouting from the stable yard, the clatter of a bucket, the bark of a larger dog, and somewhere the thin metallic sound of keys. At last, a porter opens the wicket gate and peers out. He asks names, business, origins, and whether anyone carries sickness, weapons, unpaid dues, or news from the south. The tenant says the hens are owed from Martinmas. The porter says Martinmas was a long while ago. The tenant says the hens disagree. This is not accepted as legal argument, but the porter seems almost amused. You enter the outer yard as evening thickens. Torches flare along the wall, their smoke twisting under the damp sky. Servants move quickly between kitchen, stable, brewhouse, and hall. Here, time bends around rank. In the village, bells, sun, hunger, and work shape the day for everyone together. In the abbey, prayer orders the hours. In the market, shadows and bargains pull people onward. But in the keep, one person's delay becomes everyone else's evening. The Lord has not yet come down. The meal cannot properly begin. The steward will not receive petitions until the messenger from the road is heard. The kitchen must hold food warm without ruining it, which is a delicate art and a private tragedy for onions. You stand beneath a lean-to near the hall door while servants carry trenchers, jugs, and platters past you. A boy turns a spit in the kitchen shed, his face shining with heat and resentment. A cook tests a sauce with bread, frowns, adds vinegar, then tells a maid to keep the covered dish near the embers but not too near, as if heat were a nervous horse. Marked candles burn along a sideboard inside the hall, but no candle can force a nobleman to be ready. A steward in a fur-trimmed gown checks one, sighs, and speaks to the wax as though it has failed impersonally. Some swear that a dish kept waiting too long before a lord's supper gathers bad air and causes quarrels at table. Others say quarrels come from pride, hunger, and weak ale, which seems more likely but less charming. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the kitchen charms help. A maid ties a sprig of rosemary near the serving hatch for remembrance, health, and possibly because it smells better than anxious gravy. A rider arrives near full dusk, hooves striking sparks from the stones. Men turn at once. The gate opens wider. The horse steams in the torchlight, and the rider swings down stiffly, handing a sealed packet to the steward. The seal is pressed in red wax, stamped with a device you cannot quite make out. Perhaps a hawk, perhaps a lion, perhaps a creature designed mainly to remind poorer people they do not own seals. The rider's cloak is splashed with mud to the shoulder. He is given warm ale before any of the waiting tenants are given answers, which explains several things about power without anyone needing to say them. The steward carries the packet inside. The hall quiets in a ripple. You glimpse rushes on the floor, a high table laid with cloth, iron candle stands, a salt cellar set where rank may gather around it like bees around honey. Those seated above the salt will eat better and sooner. Those below will wait, watch, and pretend not to notice. Medieval manners are full of invisible lines, and most of them seem designed to keep hungry people aware of their place. The carter shifts beside you, rubbing his hands. The wheel message he carries is small compared with sealed wax and riders. Still, he waits. The tenant waits with his hens. The reeve waits with his tallies. The linen woman waits with numb fingers. The dog waits because he has identified the kitchen as the centre of civilization. At last, the steward returns. The Lord will hear urgent road matters before supper, but rents and hens will wait until morning. The tenant closes his eyes with the expression of a man who must now sleep beside two offended birds. The carter is called forward, and you follow him into the lower end of the hall, where torchlight and candlelight tremble over faces, bowls, smoke, wool, and polished metal. The Lord sits near the high table, broad in a fur-lined cloak, listening as if time itself belongs to him and may be spent from his purse. The carter explains the broken wheel, the forest track, the swollen ford, the pilgrims, the market rumours, and the road north. The Lord asks questions slowly. Servants stand still with dishes cooling in their hands. A candle gutters, somewhere outside. A bell rings from a distant chapel, but inside the keep, no one moves until the Lord has finished thinking. Then he nods. The road is to be watched at dawn. The ford is to be marked. A message is to ride at first light. Supper may begin. Only then does the hall exhale. Platters move. Ale is poured. The tenants' hens rustle miserably in their basket near the door. You receive a place low in the hall and a bowl of hot broth that tastes better because you have been made to wait for it. Outside, torches burn against the deepening dark. Inside, lordly time settles over everyone like a heavy cloak, warm for some, cold at the edges for others, and you learn that without clocks, the powerful do not merely keep time. They make other people keep it for them. Supper in the keep does not hurry, because nothing near power hurries unless a horse is saddled beneath it. You sit low in the hall with broth warming your hands, watching platters move first toward the high table, then downward by degrees, like grace descending a staircase and losing interest halfway. The Lord speaks with the rider over sealed wax and road trouble, while servants keep their eyes lowered and their feet quick. Above you, smoke gathers under the rafters, and candle flames lean whenever the great door opens to let in a thread of night air. The broth is rich with onions, herbs, and a little barley, and there is coarse bread for dipping, dark crust softening at the edge of your bowl. The dog sits beneath the bench, invisible to authority and very visible to anyone holding meat. The tenants' hens rustle in their basket near the doorway, offended by politics, weather, and the general shape of human society. The carter eats slowly, one hand still marked with grease from the repaired wheel, his face loose at last in the warmth. A chapel bell sounds somewhere beyond the yard, faint through stone and timber. Few heads turn now. The day has been full of bells, town bells before dawn, abbey bells over cloisters, market bells over mud, uncertain bells in rain, night bells half swallowed by fields. This one falls softly into the hall and becomes part of the fire, the spoons, the low talk, the creak of benches. You begin to feel that time has not been absent from this world at all. It has been everywhere, only never trapped in one little face. When the meal thins into scraps and slow drinking, a servant comes with fresh rushes for the lower end of the hall. She scatters them where travellers will sleep, adding dried lavender and a pinch of crushed bay leaves. Some swear bay keeps dreams from turning sour, while others say it mostly discourages fleas if the fleas are unusually polite. No one can quite agree, but everyone welcomes the cleaner smell. Wet wool, smoke, animals, men, onions, and tallow have fought bravely all evening. Lavender arrives like a tired but determined saint. The Lord rises at last, and all lesser movement pauses around him. He withdraws through a side door with his steward, the rider, and 2 men carrying candles. As soon as he is gone, the hall changes shape, shoulders drop, servants breathe, the high table is cleared, the priest finishes his cup, a boy sneaks a crust to the official keep dog, who accepts it with less gratitude than your road dog would have shown, proving that status spoils even animals. You step outside with the carter one final time to check the yard before sleep. The sky has cleared, stars gleam above the keep walls, and the moon lays pale light along the ditch. Torches burn lower now, their flames smaller, their smoke straighter in the cold. The repaired wheel stands where it should, quiet after so much complaint. The horse dozes. The rider's mount is being rubbed down with straw in the stable, steam rising from its flanks. A groom hums to keep rhythm as he works. Stroke after stroke, because even care for animals follows a measure older than counting. Near the gate, a watchman lifts a lantern and nods. He says the next watch begins when the chapel bell rings again, or when the moon clears the tower roof, whichever the captain chooses to believe tonight. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether guards trust bells more than stars, or captains more than either. The watchman carries a little iron nail sewn into his belt against night fears, a habit he claims not to believe in while keeping it very carefully in place. You look up at the tower roof, then at the moon, then toward the dark line of the road beyond the gate. All day, you have followed sign straw stirring before dawn, roosters bragging into frost, sunlight crawling over thresholds, monks moving at bells, market shadows shortening, stomachs calling noon, sand slipping through glass, rain confusing every certainty, birds quieting in forest branches, hearth embers counting supper, watchfires dividing night, stars guiding pilgrims, saints' days holding seasons, and a lord making others wait in the cold. None of it is exact in the way a clock is exact, yet it is intimate. It requires attention. It asks you to belong to the weather, the work, the people around you, and the slow turning of sky. Back inside, the hall is settling. The half-burned candles are pinched out one by one. A few remain near the door and high table, small golden eyes in the dimness. Servants bank the hearth, drawing ash over the coals so fire will sleep but not die. Blankets are handed out, thin wool smelling of smoke and storage chests. The dog circles twice in the rushes at your feet, then folds himself into a warm comma beside your cloak. You lie down near the lower wall, where the stone is cold but the hearth still breathes enough heat to reach you. Around you, travellers murmur, cough, shift, and settle. The carter wraps his cloak over his shoulder. The tenant whispers crossly to his hens. Somewhere above, behind a wooden screen, a noble household moves more softly toward feather beds and linen sheets, while down here the rushes do their humble best. This, too, is time rank deciding how the night is felt. A final bell rings, very faint, perhaps from the chapel, perhaps from the village below the hill, perhaps only remembered from the Abbey Road. You do not need to know. Your body understands what it means. The day has folded itself away. The world has become fire glow, wool, breathing, old wood, and darkness beyond shutter cracks. The candles grow smaller, the fire settles lower, the dog sighs once against your boot. You close your eyes, and all the day's measures drift together. Bell, bird, shadow, hunger, candle, rain, star, saint, gate, hearth. They turn no hands, they show no numbers, yet they have carried you from cold straw before dawn to warm rushes at night, and that is enough. Now the keep grows quieter, and the hard edges of the day begin to soften. The Lord's Hall, so full of waiting and footsteps, loosens into stillness. The last servant crosses the floor with a careful tread, and the last candle trembles in its iron cup before someone shields it with 2 fingers and lets the darkness take it gently. Nothing vanishes all at once. The rafters remain above you, dark and patient. The stones remain under the rushes. The banked fire remains, breathing red beneath ash, holding a little morning inside itself. You rest there without needing to know the hour. Outside, the watchman walks his slow path along the wall. Farther away, frost gathers on hedges, fields lie under moonlight, and the road you travelled becomes pale, empty, and calm. The abbey bell will wake again when it must. The rooster will boast when he feels important. The market cross will cast its shadow. The marked candle will lose another ring, and somewhere a pilgrim will look up at the stars and decide the road is ready. But for now, none of that asks anything from you. Your hands are warm beneath the blanket. Your boots are near the wall. Your breath slows with the breathing of the hall. The smell of smoke, lavender, wool, and old timber folds around you like a curtain. The medieval world, with all its bells and burdens, drifts farther away, not gone, only softened, as if seen through amber firelight. You are safe enough for tonight. The gate is barred, the embers are kept, the dog sleeps close, the dark is deep, but it is not empty. It is full of quiet signs, waiting patiently for morning, and you do not need to follow them now. You only need to rest.